This is the number one reason people hate driving for Uber and Lyft, and it's only one word. Welcome back to Buck Living, a channel all about making money. I just realized actually I'm wearing headphones. I was just working on like a new track, by the way. These are the Audio-Technica ATH M50X, in case you're curious, in case you're making music or you like listening to music. But anyway, I'll just wear them for the rest of the video. But like I said, this is the number one reason. I've interviewed over 1,000 drivers, read hundreds, if not at this point, over 1,000 comments as well on this channel, interviewed tons of people, and I've realized it comes down to one word. And it's not the money, which I think what most people think. It's not the legal aspects. It's not the insurance. It's not dealing with a vehicle. It's not dealing with the passengers. It is not dealing with the taxes or anything. I know this is a pretty intense build-up too, by the way. But short answer, because I'm not going to ramble on any longer and keep you in suspense. This is what I've realized. The one word is reliability. Now, I know that seems a bit random at first, being like, what do you mean reliability? Now, taking a step back, and this is what I've realized, and I'm going to go in depth on this because I just did a video previously. The video I just posted was about, do people like driving for Lyft and Uber? And the answer is typically yes. A lot of people do. And there's a bunch of comments I got in that video, but what I've realized too, meta-analyzing all these drivers and what they do and everything, the main reason why I find people don't like it versus those who do, if I had to kind of compare them, is actually, which is really kind of interesting, those who drive full-time and those who drive part-time. Now, one thing I've said in other videos, which is really, I think, a very interesting point they say to a lot of drivers, is there's a lot of benefits to driving for Lyft and Uber. The flexible schedule, instant cash outs, you don't have a hold on how many hours you can drive, pretty much an unlimited, quote-unquote, amount of hours you can drive. And then lastly, the low barrier to entry. You can make about $25, $30, $35 an hour. Sometimes it's lower, anywhere between, I'd say, $20 to $35 an hour. I know that's a bit of a spread, but depending on where you live, when you can drive, etc. And you can make that amount of money just having a driver's license, right? As opposed to me, like I said before, I'm going through this super quick because I mentioned this in a bunch of videos. But in case you haven't seen any of my videos, I'm a former accountant, and there's accounting jobs that pay the same, if not less than that, and you need an accounting degree. When it comes to driving Lyft and Uber, you just need a driver's license, right? Now, coming to reliability, though, and this is what's very interesting now talking about part-time versus full-time, is those benefits I just mentioned. When you go from part-time to full-time, those benefits still exist, right? And the benefits increase a little bit, right? If you're doing it part-time, you usually have another job, maybe you're in school, maybe you have other obligations. And when you go to full-time, yes, those benefits are increased. You're more flexible now. Now, let's say if you make money in other ways, well, now when it comes to Lyft and Uber, all the money you make is via instant cash outs, right? So those benefits are increased a little bit. Not a ton, but a little bit more, right? Makes sense. But the negative aspects heavily increase. I'd say almost, if I had to guess, I'm just making numbers up. If, let's say, the benefits of driving for Lyft and Uber are let's say 4 out of 10, right? 4 out of 10. They might go to, let's say, a 6 out of 10 when you go to full-time. But when it comes to the negative aspects of driving Lyft and Uber, which let's say are a 4, let's say, out of 10 as well, let's keep things equal, those now jump to an 8 out of 10. So the positive aspects do get better when you go to full-time and increase a little bit, but the negative aspects severely increase. And this causes a bunch of very unique issues that I have noticed. And the biggest one, like I said, is reliability. Here's the main reason why. When I first started driving, I'd say on average, if I had to be more specific in terms of the hourly rate, about $20 to $25 an hour is what I'd say I was making when I first started driving in about 2015. Now, granted, I got better and I developed strategies. I have done a bunch of videos on this channel about how to make more money as a driver. And I found that overall, if I boost that up, maybe between 25 and 30-ish an hour, sometimes I made as high as 60 an hour, and everything. But what's interesting is years later now, from 2015 to now, when people ask me what's the average driver amount, what is the average income for a driver, it's 20 to 25 an hour. So you're making the same amount years ago, which is a good amount. Now, with inflation and everything, not as appealing, right? Another thing is Lyft and Uber is now taking a bigger cut out of a lot of drivers' earnings. I've mentioned this before. Back in the day, it was 20%. Hard cut. If I made $100, I get 80, Lyft and Uber get 20. Super flat. But now, it depends area to area. A lot of places, Lyft and Uber is taking out around half. And other places, sometimes as high as 70%. It's almost flip-flop now. You get 20%, and Lyft and Uber could get 80%. They're charging passengers more and paying you less. The list goes on and on. And so what I found for a lot of people driving at the end of the day is just not as reliable. you can't really rely, or I think to go even more, to use a more of an intense word, you can't really trust Lyft and Uber anymore. Because one, like I said, the pay, you're like, I just don't know if I'm going to pay that much. Am I going to get paid 30 an hour this week or 20 an hour? I can't really rely on that. When it comes to insurance issues, right? Because a lot of insurance companies, of course, know about Lyft and Uber now, and they're very heavily observant of that. If, let's say, you don't tell your insurance agent or your company that you're driving Lyft and Uber, you get into an accident, they could hold you liable in the sense that you have to pay for everything on your own. Can you rely on that? Tough to say. This is why you need rideshare insurance. However, that's a whole other thing, a whole other can of worms as well. Again, I do suggest, though, make sure you get rideshare insurance. I have no affiliation with any rideshare insurance company, but just make sure you do that. The third thing, if you get into an accident, right, this is a huge issue. Now, granted, I will say this channel is now sponsored by a law firm. I have their contact information listed below in the description. I'm really happy because one of their specialties is ride sharing. So again, contact them if you say my name. You actually get your first consultation free. So got to give them a shout out. They're all ready for any ride sharing issues. But even still, the more that you're on the road, statistically speaking, the more likely you are to get into an accident. Not even just an accident outside of your vehicle or something happening outside of your vehicle, but now inside your vehicle. We've all heard these stories of sexual assaults, people with assault and battery, drivers getting attacked, drivers getting all these kind of issues happening to them while they're driving. It could be unreliable. You never know what you're going to get and what type of passenger you're going to get. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to scare anybody, because I don't believe in YouTube videos that create unnecessary like fear or whatever just to get clicks and get audience attention. These are about 99% of cases if you look at the math and the statistics. So it's about a 1% chance, but I think it is still important to mention. And then another big thing, like I mentioned in a bunch of other videos, is deactivation. This seems like it's getting a little better. I think the pendulum swung in different ways where in the beginning, deactivation wasn't that much of an issue. I never really heard about it unless you did something really messed up as a driver. And then it seemed to get worse. And now things are getting, I think, a little bit better. The pendulum is now starting to swing back to, I think, a middle ground. Because remember, there's good drivers and bad drivers out there. There's not a perfect amount of drivers. I mean, there are some really bad drivers. And in case you don't know, when it comes to deactivation, deactivation means you go to, like, say, pull up Lyft and Uber. You go to start driving. And it says, sorry, your account's being deactivated. You're being studied. Or we're reviewing your account because a claim was made towards you. And, like, say, a week goes by. 2 weeks go by, you can't drive, and now you're like, shoot, like, how am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to pay for bills? And like say they do reactivate you, but now you're like, okay, I'm reactivated, I can drive again, but there's this odd anxiety in the back of your head. Am I going to get deactivated randomly again, right? You don't know. And granted, Uber, I did a video about this. Uber is now trying to solve some of the issues, especially the biggest thing I find when it comes to deactivation, the biggest cause of it is actually passenger disputes, which is why I suggest if you do have a dispute, contact Lyft and Uber in advance. But I mean, I've heard of story after story of a passenger getting in a dispute with the driver, or they say, why'd you charge me so much? And the driver's like, hey, I don't control the prices. Lyft and Uber makes them. And the passenger, to retaliate, says, oh, you know what? My driver was drunk. And they were definitely driving when drunk. And now Uber says, and Lyft says, oh, wow, they're driving when drunk. We shouldn't have that. And don't get me wrong, there have been cases of Uber and Lyft drivers driving while drunk and getting DUIs. So that can happen. But most of the time, it's the passenger just saying what they can to maybe get a free ride out of it, or just trying to get back at the driver. You get deactivated through some BS claim, and Uber and Lyft investigates it, and they're like, oh, you know what? It's a passenger. We're going to reprimand them. But now as the driver, you're like, great. Can I even rely on it anymore, right? So going through all these different points, from how much they're paying you, the amount they're taking out of your earnings, being prone to accidents, insurance issues, things happening in the car, things like deactivation, even things like taxes, right? If you don't understand accounting, and which a big project I have, remember, I want to stress, even though I'm a former accountant, I'm not your accountant, get a tax accountant, just kind of running through the things. And it's not a bad idea too. I don't think I've mentioned this in any video, but this is actually important. I should mention this a lot more. I would not, how do I do this? If you go to contact a tax accountant, remember you can do so before tax season. It's not a bad idea, and I stress this, and I actually encourage this, to contact a tax accountant before your tax time even comes up and say, hey, I'm a Lyft and Uber driver. Here's my expected income for this year, in case you know it or not. Or do you have any tips in advance for me? This is important. Things like saving receipts, keeping track of different things, of course, saving money too. I suggest typically to save about 20 to 30%, just kind of, so for example, let's say you make $30,000, actually 30 but a little bit different. Let's you make like 60K in a year, save about 15K. Do I think you have to spend 15K on taxes? Probably not, but you're better off saving that. And then when tax season rolls around, they're like, hey, you owe 5K. And you're like, okay, boom, 5K, here you go. Now I have 10K pocketed in savings that I expect to spend, but now I have extra money. As opposed to, like, say, you don't save that much money, you only have 3K in your savings, and they contact you and say, hey, you now owe 5K. And you're like, wait, I owe $5,000. That can be a rude awakening for a lot of people, and that can be something that makes Lyft and Uber, like I said, less reliable to a lot of people because you're like, look, I don't get the math, I don't get the accounting. This whole taxes thing is way more complicated as opposed to a job, which I think, being honest, I think it's easier for most people to have taxes being taken out of your paycheck, so you don't even see the money, as opposed to the other way around where you have to kind of budget more and be more smart when it comes to the math. So like I said, with all these things being said, I know a lot of drivers when it comes to a video like this, when I talk about the #1 reason that drivers hate driving Lyft and Uber, think the pay or the financials, or basically, at the end of the day, the amount of money that's getting in their pocket. But I don't think it's that. I think it's the reliability that I've seen, because the reliability, I think a subset of that, the biggest one, is the pay. You cannot go out and drive anymore and fully rely on that income being able to pay your bills as the income has gotten worse. And as things have gotten more expensive, you can't rely being like, okay, gas is now more expensive. Maintenance on my car is more expensive. Oil changes are now more expensive. The depreciation on my car maybe is going up. All these different metrics increasing. You're like, if this continues to increase, can't even rely on Lyft and Uber anymore, because the amount of making is getting smaller and the amount that I'm spending is now getting bigger, meaning that gap is getting bigger and bigger. Is it even a reliable and worthwhile job at all anymore? And to bring things back full circle to what I was talking about in the beginning of this video, part-time versus full-time, and the slight increase of the positive aspects, but the big increase of the negative aspects, if you think about it, if you have to rely, and this is a big thing for this video now, talking about both sides of reliability. If you personally have to rely on that Lyft and Uber income, things get a lot more scary, right? When it comes to you doing it part-time, a lot of people who do it part-time are like, you know what? I just want extra money. On a Friday night, I'd rather protect my liver and my wallet and make money and be healthy, right? I want to go on a vacation. Why not have some extra spending money to have fun? I can buy a few more drinks, right, on the beach, and I'm going to do Lyft and Uber. I want to save up for, I remember I was doing this when I was DJing, although I did do Lyft and Uber both part-time and full-time. I want to buy a new piece of DJ equipment or maybe a new pair of headphones or whatever. I am going to, I'm going to go out and drive and do that. So you don't have to fully rely on the income. It's more of an added benefit when you drive part-time. Once you get to full-time, it reminds me a lot of sales. If you've ever done commission-based sales, where you're like, shoot, I have to make a good amount this week. I have to, or else I can't pay this bill. I cannot put food on the table. I cannot buy things for my kids. I can't buy diapers for my children, right? Like, these become real world serious issues. And when you have to 100% fully rely on Lyft and Uber, I think that's where a lot of the hate, the negativity, and the bad comments come about, because now you're fully 100% not just going from, extra money's cool. Now you're like, no, I need the money. I 100% need the money. And this, I think, brings up another interesting point. I've talked before about how I get a lot of negative comments on this channel. Not about me, per se. They're just about Lyft and Uber. But what I've noticed is if you're driving full-time, you probably have more, and I wonder whether this is the right way, there's probably a better way to phrase this, you're more interested or invested in the Uber and Lyft culture. I don't know if that's the right word, but if you think about it, I think more people who watch my channel, I've noticed, tend to be more full-time drivers than part-time. Because, I mean, if you think about it, if you drive for Lyft and Uber 5 hours a week, you're probably not going on YouTube to watch Lyft and Uber videos. You might be, but I find more people, which is interesting how this is like a spread. I find the people who watch this channel that I've noticed, and I've talked to them, most of them are full-time, a small amount of them part-time, but then also another good amount of them don't drive at all. So it's almost, they're either on opposite ends of the spectrum. Either they're driving full-time, they're all in on Lyft and Uber when it comes to being a rideshare driver, or they kind of are just kind of curious about Lyft and Uber. They're kind of almost, which makes sense, you know, they want to kind of review all the requirements, review how much money you can make, see the good and the bad before kind of tiptoe. They almost want to tiptoe into the water, so to speak. And that makes a lot of logical sense. Never a bad idea to get as much information as you can and study a lot of articles, videos and whatnot before doing anything. Never a bad idea, right? But on this point, though, like I said, when it comes to the full-time drivers going out to that aspect, it does bring up all these points from the reliability aspect and amplify them a tremendous amount. And this is the biggest reason. This is the biggest reason why you see so many negative comments on this channel, because if you have to rely on Lyft and Uber and they take a bigger cut than you expected out of your earnings, you're now in shock and you're now scared. If, like, say, you're relying on Lyft and Uber and you expect to make a certain amount, and for whatever reason they're not just paying you a certain amount per hour, now you're in a really tough position. If, like, say, you drive and get randomly deactivated and you're driving full time and you have to rely on that income and they deactivate you, now you're in a whole position where now, for lack of better, you almost feel screwed, because now you're like, shoot, my back's against the wall. I have no way to make money. It's not like I have another job. This is my job, and now I have no way to make money. And like I said in a bunch of other videos, things have gotten progressively worse, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Again, I don't like to be negative or pessimistic, or I say this, I don't like to be unnecessarily pessimistic, but I also like to be realistic. And in 2024, like I've talked about in a bunch of other videos, with the increase of drivers going on the road, this is now causing a bit of an issue where the more drivers that are on the road, I hate to say it, from my perspective, I can't see, and I may be wrong, let me know what you think in the comments if there's another perspective on this, I can't see any benefit of there being more drivers on the road. I think it's only going to hurt drivers. And so with everything being considered, with now, like, say, more drivers being on the road, it might be even less reliable next year or the year after for you to get a ride, for you to make money. This whole aspect of reliability is getting worse and worse and worse. And like I said, this is the number one reason why drivers hate driving for Lyft and Uber. And unfortunately, again, I don't like to be negative or be the bearer of bad news. I can only see it getting, unfortunately, worse.